We're now going to go to extreme real estate and looking at how professionals are increasingly working without a fixed space. So please welcome Mark Gilbreath, the founder of LiquidSpace from San Francisco and Extreme Real Estate. Mark.
Thank you. Can I ask you all just to stand just for a moment, please? And roll the neck. All right. Big breath. All right. 20 minutes till lunch, please. There we go. So just for introduction purposes, I hail from San Francisco, and I come to this discussion of real estate first and foremost as a technologist. Right? So 25 years in Silicon Valley, beginning as a design engineer and then moving into management, then a young CEO 15 years ago. And then somewhere along the way, I tripped up and I fell into commercial real estate for a brief interlude, poorly timed. And those experiences are what have framed what has been now the last 8 years of my sort of investment in career, which has been around real estate technology. So in a chat with Philip about 6 weeks ago, we kind of riffed and stumbled upon the notion of extreme real estate as a metaphor to frame this pursuit that I've been on for 8 years, and so I'm happy to share with you today. That theme, that is. So first off, perhaps our perspective, my perspective on the status quo that we play in today. We as practitioners of real estate, the world has changed. There are new demands that are being placed upon us as practitioners that really are radically different than what we were having to contend with even just a few years ago. From a CRE executive standpoint, we're being asked to contend with mobility that has untethered our employees from fixed place. We're being challenged by our CFOs and our C-suite to deliver more return on capital as top-line revenues have been hampered. We're being expected to deliver a real estate solution that contends with resiliency in a world where storms and dramatic events can interrupt the typical flow of business. We've got these agendas in the workplace from different age groups, i.e. new work styles that we suddenly have to reconcile inside of our fixed buildings. And lastly, we as real estate executives are now, for the first time, being asked to consider ourselves as HR professionals. Your workplace is a part now of the equation that leads to hiring and retention. That's all new. On top of that, these whipstarts, these upstarts that are moving into our offices, these employees, are coming with these new expectations that we're meant to honor. They're concerned about engagement. Whoa, what a thought. They want purpose in their careers. They actually are thinking about productivity. And overall, they want choice, a word that we've heard a great deal of the last day and a half. Challenge, though, is that those new demands are being addressed, or we are being asked to address them with an old tool set. Our toolbox is quite rusty. If we think about the conventional, traditional model, our asset model or approach to real estate is fundamentally broken to deal with those demands. This is what you have to solve for as a real estate professional, a resource requirement that ebbs and flows. It's never up and to the right. It's never linear. Yet, the model that you have, the tool you have to contend with that is a multi-year fixed commitment to space. You can't match that box to that curve. It's impossible. So what's the outcome? The reality is that you're either contending with shortage, where the hiring manager or the chief executive is beating on you to speed that delivery to market, or more often than not, you're dealing with the aftermath, the waste in the portfolio. Much of my perspective on this was shaped 15 years ago when, as a young CEO, the largest investment I made as a technology CEO was my 5-year fixed lease in Milpitas, California. We just raised $15 million from 3i, actually, a London-based equity firm. And I was having to forecast what my headcount would be 5 years into the future. I had no idea what it would be in 1 quarter. The other broken tool in the box is the approach to human capital. And I think of this really as a benevolent tyranny. The establishment, the CFO, the facilities manager, and the architect working in a well-intentioned way contemplate things like the current stock price, what can we afford to spend. They look at employee churn rate, they look at lease comps, 10-year staffing models, their budget, their analysis of the current portfolio, and the cool kit that they just saw at the Neocon show. And they distill all of that into, again, benevolently well-intentioned, environments that look, unfortunately, like the cube farms of old that are still far too prevalent, Or more recently, and I would frame this as another example of benevolent tyranny, more recently, this pendulum swing to open plan, which is still a command and control approach to prescribing real estate to the masses. Well-intentioned, but no less command and control than the cube far decade before it. I would contend that that's a broken model as well. If we think about workplace, let me suggest a new definition for it. Old model, 1.0, would be the model that considers the fixed assets, the estate that we own as real estate practitioners, which has two big chunks today. I've got the fixed components that are assigned to people, offices and cubes, and then I've got the transactional pieces inside of my fixed portfolio, my hot desks, my meeting rooms. But the new ripple, the new wrinkle, if you will, is that increasingly employees are leaving work to get work done. And mobility, this glorious, wonderful, disruptive device, has affected that, right? This plus ubiquitous connectivity means that I don't have to show up at that amazing office that you built to get the work done. In fact, I don't much of the time. Whether I'm down the hall at a conference room inside my building or in our cafe, or whether I'm off-site at a client location or in the air, there's a burgeoning ecosystem of places where that work can happen. It's happening in office business centers, in co-working spaces, and hotels, and even private companies that are building porosity into their portfolio and opening it up to the outside world. So I'll suggest to you the new definition, the new mental framework for workplace is not the assets that you all own and lease that are on your balance sheet, but rather think of workplace as simply the places where your employees work. Let's walk into this philosophy from the point of view of the end user. Workplace is all of the places where your employees work. Your employees are the greatest expense. They are what yields your profits. So let's think about workplace as they see it, which is everywhere. Moreover, that reality is creating some new pressures on all of us from an operational standpoint. So asset efficiency. While that exodus has been picking up steam, what's left behind is a workplace, from a fixed standpoint, that's ever less utilized. Inside the US, where I have trafficked mostly with our company, the well-established norm is that that fixed asset portfolio is operating at roughly 35% of the work day. Right? That's the work day, to say nothing of the after hours. So what's happening? Well, you are all being challenged. In fact, you are all moving organically in this direction. The fixed portfolios are growing smaller. The variable portfolios, growing without growth, are becoming a larger and larger piece of that total workplace. So with that as a backdrop of all that's ill, let me introduce this new metaphor in my rough, somewhat crude PowerPoint slides to sort of frame the idea of extreme real estate. At the core of extreme real estate is a disruptive idea, mobility and choice as the new change masters. I think many of the people in the room have been change masters. They've been change agents, whether as consultants or inside practitioners inside companies. We've all been a part of a change management initiative when an ERP system rolls in or a new workplace plan rolls in. Top down, benevolently, we all prescribe to the employees the change that we want them to undertake. Well, here's a new model for it. Here's a new mental model for this. Let's consider that the actual change masters are the employees themselves. And this is their agent of change. This used to be a phone. Then it became an email device. Then it became a game platform. Now this is a portal to goods and services, more than anything else. This is the most efficient means for me to effectively find and transact virtually anything today in our connected culture. So now let's consider what a typical day in the work life is for an employee at many of your companies. Oh, by the way, unbeknownst to you. Let's imagine or fashion this individual on screen here as a sales executive. Right? So as a sales executive, I want to polish up some presentation ware before I head off on the road to meet with a client. I'm more likely now to reach for my phone and tap on a live marketplace called Odesk to hire some talented graphic artist to carry out a transaction for me to polish that slideware, because it'll happen far faster and arguably cheaper than me going to the internal marketing department inside my company. So reference Charles's comments earlier this morning about systems. The system of work used to be all those institutions inside the company, but now I can go to Odesk, a marketplace, and hire a body anywhere in the world for dollars per hour. On the way to the airport, I'll reach for my phone again in my pocket. I'll tap a button in this miraculous service called Uber. Will deliver a car to feet from me in minutes. Transaction done, delivered to my destination. Arrive at my destination to carry out that work activity, and rather than doing it in the Pret or in the Starbucks, I'll tap into LiquidSpace to find a more appropriate space to do that more delightfully. If I really want to amaze my client, I might reach to yet another marketplace, this one popular in the States called Postmates, to have food delivered to that location in the moment. And lastly, at the end of my successful day as a traveling salesperson, I might reach for Airbnb, yet again reaching for my phone, yet again reaching for a service through my device to have a more interesting or more engaging or empathetic experience from an overall standpoint, Airbnb. All of these are marketplaces. All of these are online marketplaces. All of these live on my phone. And here's the last piece. All of these are services that are now epidemic inside the Fortune 500, and nobody is asking permission. There's no change management that's driving this. Airbnb is in virtually 100% of the Fortune 500. They do not ask for permission. It's traveling word of mouth because all of these companies have made that experience dramatically simple, delightfully simple, disruptively simple. So let's contemplate then in an extreme context, what are the implications of this to real estate as an industry, as an estate? Extreme flexibility. So consider the notion of a real estate transaction with one finger in 1 minute. Now let's contrast that against the real estate delivery model of old. Can you do it in less than 6 months? I hire the brokers, I go do the site selections, I hire the architect, they build the incredible plan for me, I get the zoning, the approvals, we build the building, or move into the lease, we furnish the environment, we wait for AT&T to deliver the Wi-Fi, and ultimately we move in. One finger, 1 minute. That's extreme flexibility. Extreme personalization. Imagine putting into the hand of every employee the capacity to dictate workplace on their own terms for the task at hand and their temperament in the moment. We are all different. Our work styles are all different. I could be the very same pay grade, the very same schooling, the very same job function as Peter Miskovich, but he and I might have radically different work styles. Yet the benevolent tyranny presumes that the same setting is best for us. So what if I can put radical personalization into the hands of every employee and allow them to choose the environment that matches what is best for them? Allow them to navigate into that choice by thinking about or migrating through collections of space that are defined around the activity I want to conduct, not square footage. What if I can navigate through a curation of space that understands peace and quiet, or understands what a startup might need, or understands what a deposition might call for as a business activity? As an outcome, then, imagine if the world was my oyster. Imagine if for all of the business functions I need to carry out, I could choose the very best space. And I could take on that estate from a real estate context transactionally. So whether it's a new product launch and I want to do it on a fancy boat in Miami to wow the press, or a sales team meeting in an engaging, eclectic, and empathetic environment in San Francisco, or a touchdown for some productivity while transiting through Dulles Airport, or a hackathon in San Francisco. Imagine all of that real estate being available to me, but purely on a transactional basis, and purely to me as a person, as an individual, to choose on my terms. Extreme empowerment. With one finger and 1 minute, I am my own IT manager. I didn't ask permission to use Uber. I didn't ask permission to use Airbnb. I didn't ask permission to bring my iPhone to the office, right? I'm not asking IT for permission to put the various apps on that device. I am my own IT manager. I'm also my own architect. I'm choosing my workplace on a real-time basis, whether that's within the corporate fixed portfolio or beyond. I am my own architect. I am my own CRE manager. I'm buying that estate when and where I need it. No, by the way, you needn't worry, because those transactions that I'm carrying out, you can have audit trail on it. And oh, by the way, my return on capital from my real estate investments transactionally is far higher than buying a building and having it sit vacant. I'm my own HR manager as well, as it relates to engagement and empowerment, because I've chosen how I know I can work best. Extreme empowerment. Extreme scalability. Third place. Well, first place is my home, second place is where I work, but there is extreme scalability. There's reason for optimism. There's extreme scalability and possibility in the land that lives in between. For me, mobility could be free address within my headquarters, so I move away from that fixed desk or cube, and it might be the hot desk or the war room or the agile space or the meeting room or the lounge area within my building. It also could be free range in the car, on GoGo Wireless in the air. But here's where things get interesting for us as a company. There now are a burgeoning array of places, an ecosystem, that are becoming in the business of space. co-working spaces, hotel companies like Marriott, office business centers originated by Regis, but now a global industry, accelerators, conference centers, incubators, but it doesn't end there. Now some less conventional thinking. We have businesses now that are rethinking their portfolios. Capital One that Primo spoke of. If you want to work in the Capital One co-working space in San Francisco, you could actually book it through LiquidSpace. Libraries, banks, realtors, restaurants, furniture showrooms, all great spaces in their own right, all sitting radically underutilized the vast majority of the day. Think furniture showrooms for a moment, right? They're glorious, and they are museum pieces. Why not open them up and make them tours? Lastly, and this is the real iceberg under the surface, because I'll suggest that businesses in the business of space, this is just the tip of the iceberg. This might be 1.5% to 2% of the global office stock. Add up all of the Regis and it's a nit. Add up all of the Marriotts and the Hiltons of the world and it's still a nit. The iceberg under the surface is the institutional portfolios. The REITs, the private enterprises that are sitting on shadow inventory and private portfolios. So what of that? A quick dive into the possibility within that iceberg under the surface. So let's contemplate a reimagining of REITs, or just an institutional portfolio. Intrinsically, it's a collection of buildings. The business model of the traditional model has been, I as a tenant come in and I lease a floor plate, or maybe a couple. I put my people into it, I prescribe that benevolently, come to my workplace, this is where you should work. But there's a missed opportunity here, because this portfolio might be 10 or 50 or 500 buildings. Why am I locking my tenants into just one location? What if I actually looked to those spaces within my portfolio as an institutional owner that could be shared? Most REITs, most buildings such as the one we're in, actually have environments built out that were intended to be utilized by the tenants. They're just painfully difficult to find and transact. You email or you call or email the property manager, send a notice over, listen, I just wanted a meeting room for an hour. What if those spaces could be unlocked? What if one of the privileges of living in one building within a portfolio meant that you unlocked the entire portfolio? That's a radical thought. That could drive for more customer engagement. That might create more value in my fixed footprint. It might also allow me to contemplate taking less space because I know I can leverage the entire portfolio, because I do know that my employees are working on a distributed basis. So wow, huge opportunity for portfolios to change the conversation with their current tenants and also open the door and invite new tenants. Our #1 property in the world now is in Melbourne, Australia. It's this very scenario. 2/3 of the revenue is coming from the tenants in the building that are paying for excess space when they need it, and or simply a different environment. 1/3 of the revenue is coming from new customers walking into the building and activating it. But that's just scratching at the surface. The big opportunity, looking forward, is monetizing the structural vacancy. The very best REITs in America, and I need to do research on a more broad basis, the very best REITs, the best performing REITs in the US have a structural vacancy of no less than 8%. You statistically cannot fill more of a building or a portfolio if you're leasing space in multi-year terms. It just never happens. So the entire industrial real estate complex doesn't consider any opportunity here. The banks that underwrite these properties, they don't expect an opportunity here. This Swiss cheese of inventory, hundreds of millions of square feet, sits structurally idle all of the time, and that Swiss cheese moves about. Well, what if there was an opportunity to begin to transactionalize that space? Right? We have vast quantities of capacity where we're standing in a building that is an example of that. The enormous opportunity I would contend for Canary Wharf is to look at extreme flexibility for portfolios such as this. We heard earlier from the assistant mayor and from Charles about the acute impacting and the economics that are making London such a challenging place. Yet we have inventory, amazing potential spaces that are sitting idle much of the time. Huge opportunity to unlock. Extreme efficiency. Back to the old model, I think about real estate as an asset, and I think in year terms. But what if I could think of real estate as an asset in smaller terms, monthly, daily, or hourly? What could I do if that was my range of options as a practitioner? What could you do if this was your range of options? Well, let's go back to that curve. You can do some pretty exciting things. You might grow faster and move in the day the requirement exists and do so more efficiently. Happy employees, happy management. You're not holding them off while they want to put butts in seats. You might cautiously move into longer-term fixed requirements. And as your business inevitably ebbs and flows over time, you might fill the area under the curve. Putting real estate, putting workplace in all of the places where work happens, and doing so in a much more economically and environmentally friendly and sustainable way. Extreme efficiency. Extreme resiliency. There was a comment yesterday about black swans. Has everyone heard that term? This black swan is the unforecastable externality. It's Hurricane Sandy that we had maybe 5 days of notice for. It's the earthquake, it's the political conflict, it's the epidemic, things that cannot be forecasted. You cannot plan for these. These come without notice. So what might the possibility be? Well, first off, what's broken about our real estate model with respect to resiliency? Single point of failure. If I have a headquarters, if I put my employees in that location, and that location happens to fall prey to a black swan, and oh, by the way, it kind of feels like these are happening more often. Well, the problem is that I'm down. When Hurricane Sandy shut down Lower Manhattan, companies were down for months. Our phone started ringing. Why? Because the notion of a network of places that are available in real time is intrinsically resilient. This is extreme resiliency as part of an overall strategy. Extreme data. We all want to make data-driven decisions about our portfolios because the capital expenses are so great. Right? So you want to wisely choose when you add inventory or take it away. The conventional model to data has been one of pulling from fragmented sources, putting badges or badge swipes on the occupants of the building, putting sensors in chairs, walking around and counting bodies that I see in the room. Painful to do, expensive to do, difficult to get a complete view. Extreme real estate opens up the prospect of a data signal that comes from the actual consumer of the space. Imagine if you could tap into the transaction stream that individual employees were producing with their choices on a real-time basis. It could be one data set that gives you a view of the internal and the external, the true full workplace. What lies ahead? I was on a panel with Peter Miskovich about 3 weeks ago at Cornet, and he asked us all sort of our predictions of the future. So let me wrap up here with my personal point of view on what lies ahead. Peak oil. So if you've ever heard of peak oil, or if you understand the notion of a peak asset sort of curve, the idea is that at some point in time, either that asset becomes too expensive or simply becomes economically unviable to continue. It's widely believed that we are now past peak oil, right? Thankfully, because the planet needs us to be. Here's one you may not have heard. It now appears we might be approaching or have already passed peak car. Uber, which didn't exist 6 years ago as a company, is raising capital right now at a $25 billion valuation because they are now being viewed not as a black car service to get to Heathrow, but rather as an alternative to ownership. Because my car sits idle 98% of the time, and the emerging generations don't think that having a car is the status symbol that I thought when I was 16. So, peak car, second peak example. Well, I might suggest, and I'll leave you with a closing thought, that, in fact, I actually believe this. I think we are fast approaching, in fact, maybe already have reached peak office. With some CBRE data, I did an analysis a couple of years ago and came up with the conclusion we have 2.5 billion square feet of excess real estate in North America alone. If you look at the absorption curves and you assume that we continue to grow workers and put them in seats at the same rate we did for the last 35 years, we have 35 years of capacity in North America sitting idle right now. I think we are racing at the wall of peak office. And extreme real estate, its collection of capabilities and the perspectives around it are, I believe, what will drive the shift. And what I think that will allow us to look back on in 5 or 10 years is that this age that we're walking into now will be the anti of the rise of the industrial real estate complex, which was driven by cheap capital and driven by extraordinary developers and beautiful architected space. This will be the great era of building. Place still matters, great spaces still matter, but we're going to go learn how to go harvest the existing built landscape. We have to. It needs to be cheaper than building new, and it's not today. We need to embrace the charm and the ubiquity of the landscape as it's built. And our perspective is, and this is sort of our internal vision and aspiration, the outcome from the great era of unbuilding needs to be more happy people working in fewer buildings, albeit great buildings, and the planet smiles. Thanks.